if you think back in your life, even if you think back in the past couple of years, I guarantee, or I don't know if I guarantee, I guarantee, there's something that you're like, I can't believe I cared that much about it at the time. And that's where I think we are with Shedeur Sanders. Right? Like, I know there were other draft picks. I do. I'm completely aware that there are other draft picks. I just didn't hear about any of them last weekend because there was so much noise about Shedeur. So much. And it makes it hard for us to even have some sort of sense of who did well, who did poorly, what's the rest of the draft look like. I know within your own team, you're probably very, very well versed as to who they got. But in terms of in totality, that draft was made a mess by Shedeur Sanders on many draft boards. And we're talking about mock drafts not having to do with the NFL, had him going somewhere in the first round, and he ends up falling to the fifth round. If you compile that with the fact that he wasn't even the first quarterback the Browns took, they took Dylan Gabriel in the third round, you start to stop and think to yourself, holy cow, like that is just the weirdest pick ever. Even though the Browns don't have a quarterback, the old expression is, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one. What if you have five? What if you have five? They gave Joe Flacco legit money. Joe Flacco's won a Super Bowl. Joe Flacco's shown himself to be the consummate backup. Right? They have the albatross contract of Deshaun Watson. They also went out and signed Kenny Pickett. Right, who is a former first-round draft pick. He's been mostly a career backup after his time starting in Pittsburgh. So when he signs a contract with the Cleveland Browns, granted, not a big contract, $2.6 million, but he has a couple years as a starter under his belt. Like, you start to look and go like, they might keep three, but which three are they going to keep? Because you can't cut Deshaun Watson. Obviously, he's not going to be healthy. He's going to be on the IR. Then you have a bunch of others. What do you do with those? But I just think we're going to look at this thing and go, man, we cared way, way, way too much about Shedeur Sanders. Actually, Mel Kiper cared way too much about Shedeur Sanders. Here's Mel Kiper Jr. late in the draft.
Mel, you don't have to sell it to me.
No, but I don't know what we're talking about here.
You're right. Something. You're right.
Yes.
You're right. But you know what? But Mel, the draft has spoken.
That's right. That's the key, Mel. It's not putting a value judgment on whether those who passed were right or wrong. They did.
Yep.
So now, whenever you're in circumstances in life, whether you like them, whether you don't like them, whether they're fair or whether they're unfair, you might have to deal with them.
That's right.
And now Shedeur Sanders has to deal with
everything.
And for whatever reason, whether he played a minute, microscopic percentage, 0%, or it's a legitimate criticism of the way he conducted himself during the draft process, this was the result.
Yeah.
Now he has an opportunity to answer it. I think yelling at the NFL about it is not right.
There's not a quarterback. Boomer Esiason was not happy when he was a second-round pick.
Tom Brady
was not
happy.
They dropped. How'd they turn out?
And you know what?
Nobody's arguing that can happen.
The NFL has been clueless for 50 years when it comes to evaluating quarterback. Clueless. They have no idea what they're doing in terms of evaluating quarterback. That's proof. There's proof of that.
How many
times? They say we know exactly what we're talking about with quarterback. They don't.
He's right. Mel also did not fail to point out that he's got plenty of picks wrong in terms of what somebody's eval is. The Mel Kiper Jr. aspect of it is really interesting because I do think he belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, as Dan Patrick suggested going back to last week. But I also think that And look, this is a Mel either continues on or almost feels like a seminal moment where you're like, yeah, might be time to put that one out to pasture. And there's a couple reasons why, but I was told this last week that, at his peak, he was amazing. But he's past his peak, and the reason is they've had so much turnover in terms of general managers. He used to know, talk to, travel to, see everybody. Mel, for 25 years, has been a little bit of a recluse because he's had issues with traveling. It's very minor in terms of health issues that I know about, but it does limit his ability to travel. And so he's not really as connected in the league as he used to be. And that's why he's so off on this one.
Who in the hell is Mel Kiper?
Yeah, I mean, look, he was the guy. And now there are copies of a copy, and there are other guys that do film study. But that one was hard to watch. He was like personally bothered by it. And I think that the tough part about Shedeur is he doesn't present himself as crazy likable. Matter of fact, it's the opposite of that. It's the opposite of that. This is Boomer Esiason on his New York radio show earlier today talking about the reason behind Shedeur's slide.
Shedeur Sanders just torpedoed himself. His attitude off the field at the combine, his dad didn't help him either. He was on podcast talking about, this is my son. If I can get him to where I want to get him to, I'm going to do that. But, when you listen to this kid talk right prior or at the combine about if you want a new culture in your locker room, I'm the guy to do that. I can turn it around. I mean, he's very high on himself. And I think he was very off-putting to many, many coaches and general managers in the league. And I'm telling you right now, and I know this after talking to 3 different personnel people in the NFL this weekend, they didn't even have him on their board. They took him off. And they took him off because the owner said, take him off. I don't want that guy. I don't want this entitled person on our team. And I don't blame him.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think when you read scouts' views on him, there's a missing amount of arm talent, athletic talent as well. But that can be made up for if you're somebody that everybody loves. And I've heard people say, well, you didn't say this about, it's not true. It's just not true. Stop it. Everyone knows it not to be true. It's the most criticized and praised position in all of sports. So please don't say that it's because of this, that's because of that. Okay? Additionally, there's plenty of video out there, and none of the video presents himself as somebody who's humble, hardworking, gets it. Okay? He's the embodiment of an entitled jerk. He is. Now, whether that's an act or that's who he really is, I don't know, and I don't care. I'm telling you, though, that all of the things you're hearing is just confirmation bias when you see it on TV, when you watch it in games. And I don't evaluate quarterbacks for a living. Did I think that he would step up and make big plays? Sure. But it was all dink and dunk. He did have the best wide receiver in the country. He did only play for his dad ever in football. Growing up as a kid, into high school, into college, 2 different colleges, always played for his dad. So there's a daddy ball element to it. And his dad was obnoxious, and he the only reason the Browns could have drafted him was the owner stepped in and said draft him when he blew off the Browns in their meeting. You guys have all heard the stories by now. And all the stories may not be true, but if half of them are, that's probably enough. No one says you have to kowtown. You have to cow to it. You have to bow your head to people. No. You can be confident. You can be respectful. You can't be an a-hole. And he presented himself as one. And he's not talented enough to overcome the perception of him being a negative. He's just not. So I feel like we're going to look back and go, I can't believe so many were so invested in this.